If you were forced to choose between walking past a suffering animal or being late for the most important day of your life, what would you do? Some choices define who we are, revealing our true character in moments we least expect. Prepare yourself to hear a profoundly moving story of struggle, compassion, and triumph that will touch your heart in ways you never imagined possible. In the rain-soaked outskirts of Portland, Oregon, where the city's glow fades into forgotten rural roads, a moment of cruelty and abandonment would spark an extraordinary chain of events. What happened on that cold November morning would forever change the lives of a broken dog fighting for survival and a teenager with dreams bigger than his small-town reality. This is a story about second chances, about pain that seems unbearable, and about how sometimes our greatest purpose finds us when we least expect it. Michael Reynolds was 16, lanky and perpetually late, with college ambitions that made him an outsider in his blue-collar neighborhood. His daily 5-mile walk to school took him along Route 26, a stretch of road where the ditches collected everything the world wanted to forget. With headphones drowning out the passing trucks and his mind focused on the scholarship interview that could change his future, he almost missed the whimper that would alter the course of his life. The dog was small, maybe once white, but now covered in mud and blood, lying motionless except for shallow, labored breathing. His front legs bent at unnatural angles, evidence of a deliberate cruelty that someone had inflicted before tossing him away like garbage. Rain pelted down, washing ribbons of crimson into the ditch water, a timer counting down on a life that seemed destined to end alone in the mud. That morning was Michael's scholarship interview, the culmination of years of straight A's and extra credit, his one shot at escaping a town where dreams went to die. He was already cutting it close. Stopping would mean missing the interview, throwing away his future for a dog that might not even survive. The prestigious Wellington Scholarship only interviewed 5 students annually, and this was his only chance to secure the funds he desperately needed for college. Mrs. Abernathy, Michael's English teacher and the only person who truly believed in his potential, had pulled strings to get him this interview. "Don't be late," she had warned him the day before, knowing his tendency to lose track of time. "This is your ticket out, Michael. Don't let anything stop you." The weight of her expectations pressed on his shoulders as he stood there, frozen between obligation and compassion. 3 cars had already driven past that morning, their headlights briefly illuminating the suffering animal before continuing on their way. The world was full of people with somewhere important to be, with no time to stop for broken things. Michael had spent his whole life trying not to end up like the men in his town, stuck, bitter, and wondering what might have been if they just had one lucky break. The dog's eyes were what broke him, deep brown pools that somehow still held life despite the pain evident in every labored breath. They weren't asking for help, not exactly. They were simply accepting whatever came next, whether kindness or continued suffering. It was a look Michael recognized from his mother's face after his father left, the resignation of someone who expects nothing from a world that has shown them nothing but cruelty. His phone showed 7:42 a.m. The interview was at 8:15 across town, even if he called someone who would come. His mother had already left for her double shift at the diner, and they didn't exactly have the money for emergency vet bills anyway. The animal shelter in town had closed the previous year due to budget cuts, another casualty of a struggling economy that valued progress over compassion. The gentle rise and fall of the dog's chest appeared to be slowing, each breath more shallow than the last. Michael thought about his own dog, Shadow, who had died the previous year after 13 years as his most loyal companion. He thought about the interview waiting for him, about Mrs. Abernathy's face when she heard he never showed up, about his mother's disappointment when she learned he'd thrown away their chance at a better life. Rain soaked through Michael's only good shirt, the one he'd ironed the night before with such care. His notes for the interview were in his backpack, starting to curl at the edges as water seeped through the fabric. The world was giving him every reason to keep walking, every excuse to pretend he hadn't seen. No one would blame him. Not even the dog seemed to expect anything different. Time slowed as Michael made his choice, shrugging off his backpack and carefully kneeling in the mud beside the broken animal. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice catching as he got a closer look at the dog's injuries. "I'm not going to leave you here." The dog's tail moved slightly, a fragile tendril of trust forming between two souls at their most vulnerable. As gently as he could, Michael slipped off his jacket and created a makeshift stretcher for the wounded animal. Dr. Karen Wilcox had just unlocked the doors to Riverside Veterinary Clinic when her receptionist called out about a soaking wet teenager stumbling through the parking lot, cradling something in his arms. The boy was crying, tears mingling with raindrops as he pleaded, "Please help him. I think he's dying." The small dog in his arms looked more dead than alive, but something in the boy's desperate determination made her usher them in immediately, professional assessment giving way to human compassion. "I don't have any money," Michael admitted as the veterinarian quickly assessed the dog's injuries. "But I'll work. I'll clean kennels, answer phones, anything. Just please don't let him die." His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, the scholarship committee no doubt, wondering where he was. The interview had started 5 minutes ago, his future slipping away with each unanswered call. Yet as he watched the small dog fight for each breath, Michael realized some things mattered more than futures built on abandoned responsibilities. What Michael couldn't have known that rainy morning was how many lives would be touched by his simple choice to stop when others kept walking. He couldn't have predicted how a broken dog in a ditch would become the catalyst for a journey that would challenge and change an entire community's heart. As Dr. Wilcox rushed the dog into surgery, neither of them could have imagined the ripples that would spread from this moment of compassion in a world too busy to notice the forgotten souls in its ditches. The first 48 hours were critical. Dr. Wilcox emerged from surgery with exhaustion etched across her face and news that was cautiously optimistic. Both of the dog's front legs had been deliberately broken, and internal bleeding suggested he had been kicked or struck repeatedly before being discarded in the ditch. "He's stable, but I won't lie to you, Michael. His chances aren't great," she explained, washing blood from her hands. Whoever did this wanted him to suffer. The dog, whom Michael had started calling Chance, had survived the surgery, but infection had already set in, making recovery an uphill battle. Meanwhile, Michael's absence from the scholarship interview had immediate consequences. Mrs. Abernathy called repeatedly, her messages shifting from concern to disappointment. "Michael, they waited 30 minutes for you. The committee won't reschedule. I don't understand what could have been more important." His mother's reaction was worse, silent tears as she realized what this meant for their future. "We can't afford college without that scholarship, Michael. You know that." Her voice wasn't angry, which somehow made it harder to bear, weighted with resignation that cut deeper than rage. Dr. Wilcox offered Michael a job at the clinic, cleaning kennels after school to help cover Chance's mounting medical bills. Each day, Michael would sit beside the small dog's cage, talking softly about his day, as monitors beeped and IV fluids dripped. "You and me, we're both fighting against the odds," he whispered, gently stroking Chance's head. News of Michael's choice spread through the small town, opinions sharply divided. Some called it admirable, while others considered it foolish, sacrificing a bright future for a dog that might not survive. The local newspaper ran a small piece about it, which caught the attention of a regional reporter, looking for human interest stories. As Chance fought infection and pain, Michael fought his own battles at home and school. His grades began to slip as he spent evenings at the clinic instead of studying. The Wellington Scholarship Committee sent a formal rejection letter, the final nail in the coffin of his college dreams. The turning point came 3 weeks after the rescue, when Chance developed pneumonia. His weakened immune system struggled to fight off the infection, his small body trembling with fever. "We're losing him," Dr. Wilcox said one evening, her professional detachment cracking as she'd grown attached to both the dog and the dedicated teenager. That night, Michael stayed at the clinic, sleeping on the cold floor beside Chance's kennel, his hand through the bars to maintain contact. "Don't give up," he whispered repeatedly, as though his words could tether the dog to life. "You've come too far to quit now." Social media had picked up Michael's story, spreading it beyond their small town. A local community college reached out, offering a partial scholarship, significantly less prestigious than Wellington, but something. Michael barely noticed, his focus entirely on the dog fighting for his life. Mrs. Abernathy visited the clinic, her initial disappointment softening when she saw Michael's dedication. "Sometimes life's most important lessons aren't taught in classrooms," she admitted, watching Michael tenderly clean Chance's paws. "But I still wish you'd called me that morning." A police investigation began after Dr. Wilcox reported Chance's injuries as obvious animal cruelty. Detective Simmons interviewed Michael multiple times, building a case against whoever had committed such deliberate harm. "The way they broke his legs," the detective explained, "it wasn't an accident or a hit and run. Someone wanted this dog to suffer." The search for Chance's abuser revealed an underground dogfighting ring operating on the outskirts of Portland. Chance had likely been a bait dog, too small and gentle for fighting, used only to train larger, more aggressive dogs before being discarded when too injured to be useful. Chance's fever finally broke after 5 days of touch-and-go vigil. When Dr. Wilcox shared the news, Michael broke down, the weeks of stress and worry finally overwhelming him. "He's going to make it," the vet said, squeezing Michael's shoulder. "He's not out of the woods yet, but he's fighting just as hard as you believed he would." As Chance began his slow recovery, the toll of Michael's choice became increasingly clear. College application deadlines passed unmet, and his senior year progressed without the promise that had once driven him. Yet watching Chance take his first tentative steps with specially designed supports for his healing legs, Michael couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. 2 months after that fateful rainy morning, a visitor arrived at Riverside Veterinary Clinic. Elizabeth Wellington, heiress to the Wellington Foundation, had read about Michael and Chance in a national news feature that had gone viral. Without introduction, she watched Michael patiently working with Chance on his physical therapy. "So you're the boy who gave up a scholarship to save a dog," she said finally, startling Michael, who hadn't noticed her standing in the doorway. Her tone was neither judgmental nor admiring, simply curious as she studied the pair with analytical eyes. Michael stood straighter, defensive yet proud. "I didn't know I was giving it up at the time, but yes, I'd make the same choice again." Chance leaned against his leg, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes about their bond. Elizabeth nodded, taking a seat on a nearby bench. "My grandfather started the Wellington Scholarship because he believed character matters more than test scores. He was a self-made man who never forgot the stray dog that followed him to school every day during the Depression." "The committee called you irresponsible for missing the interview," she continued, watching Chance attempt a wobbly step with his healing legs. "But I wonder if refusing to help would have been the truly irresponsible choice." Her words hung in the air, a quiet challenge to conventional definitions of success. Elizabeth's visit lasted an hour, during which she asked Michael not about his grades or academic ambitions, but about Chance's recovery, about what he'd learned working at the clinic, about how he balanced school with his commitment to the dog's rehabilitation. The questions felt like another interview, though for what purpose Michael couldn't guess. Meanwhile, Detective Simmons had made progress in his investigation, arresting 3 men connected to the dogfighting ring that had abused Chance. Evidence from their phones included videos of Chance's torture, footage so disturbing the detective warned Michael not to view it. "Some things can't be unseen," he cautioned, "and you don't need those images in your head." The prosecutor asked if Michael would consider bringing Chance to court when the trial began. The dog's presence could impact the jury more powerfully than any testimony. "His scars tell the story better than our words ever could," the prosecutor explained. The prospect of facing Chance's abusers filled Michael with dread, but also determination. On the morning they were due in court, Michael's mother surprised him by taking the day off work. "What you're doing matters," she said, helping him attach Chance's special supporting harness. "I was wrong to focus only on what you lost. I haven't told you enough how proud I am of what you found instead." The courtroom fell silent when Michael entered with Chance walking slowly beside him. The dog's gait was still uneven, his front legs permanently damaged despite months of rehabilitation. Yet there was dignity in his careful steps, in the trust with which he moved forward, despite all reasons to fear humans after what they had done to him. Michael tensed when the defendants were brought in, 3 men in prison jumpsuits who showed no remorse. One even smirked when he saw Chance, a reaction that the jury clearly noted with disgust. Chance, however, showed no recognition of his tormentors. His attention focused entirely on Michael, his safe harbor in a world of uncertainty. 3 days after the court appearance, Elizabeth Wellington returned to the clinic with her father, the chairman of the foundation. "We've been discussing your situation," she said without preamble. The Wellington Scholarship has never been deferred before, but there's a first time for everything. The committee will hold a place for you next year, if you're still interested. William Wellington added, "We're also establishing a new fund for animal welfare in Chance's name. We'd like you to have a role in determining how those resources are allocated." The offer was unexpected, bridging the gap between the future Michael had planned and the path he had chosen instead. That evening, as Michael processed this turn of events, Dr. Wilcox approached with another proposition. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she said carefully. "Have you ever considered veterinary medicine? You have a natural aptitude and, more importantly, the compassion that makes a truly great vet." "I always planned on becoming an engineer," Michael replied, watching Chance sleep peacefully in his newly designated clinic bed. "I never thought about working with animals." Yet even as he spoke, he recognized the rightness of the suggestion, how it aligned with something that had awakened in him during these months of Chance's recovery. 1 year after finding Chance in that rain-filled ditch, Michael stood at a podium, addressing his graduating class as valedictorian. His academic recovery had been as remarkable as Chance's physical one, fueled by a newfound purpose that drove him to excel beyond even his previous achievements. "Sometimes our most important crossroads don't come with warning signs," he told his classmates, Chance sitting attentively at the foot of the stage. "They happen on ordinary days, when we're forced to choose between what's convenient and what's right." The Wellington Scholarship would now fund Michael's education at the state's veterinary school rather than the engineering program he'd originally planned. Elizabeth had personally championed this adjustment to the scholarship's traditional parameters, arguing that true excellence couldn't be confined to predetermined paths. Chance had become something of a local celebrity, his story inspiring a community-wide effort to shut down animal fighting rings throughout Oregon. His damaged legs would never fully heal, but with specially designed braces, he moved with surprising agility, his spirit undiminished by the cruelty he had endured. Dr. Wilcox had formally taken Michael on as an apprentice, teaching him skills that would give him a head start in veterinary school. "You have a gift," she told him after watching him calm a particularly anxious rescue dog. "Not just for the medicine, but for healing the invisible wounds that don't show up on X-rays." The Chance Foundation, funded by the Wellingtons, had already saved dozens of abused animals and sponsored education programs in schools about animal welfare and responsible pet ownership. Michael served on its board, bringing first-hand experience to discussions about allocation of resources. Mrs. Abernathy attended every meeting of the foundation, having become one of its most passionate advocates. "You taught me something too," she admitted to Michael one evening. "I was so focused on getting you out of this town that I never considered you might find your purpose within it." The 3 men responsible for Chance's abuse received the maximum sentence, a precedent-setting case that animal rights activists celebrated as a turning point in how the justice system viewed crimes against animals. More importantly, their conviction led to the discovery and shutdown of 6 more fighting operations. Michael's mother had framed the newspaper article about the sentencing alongside a photo of Chance on his first day at their home, officially adopted once his medical needs stabilized. "From forgotten to unforgettable," read the caption, a testament to how one small dog had changed so many lives through the simple act of surviving. College brought new challenges for Michael, but he tackled them with the same determination he'd shown during Chance's darkest days. Chance accompanied him to classes whenever permitted, a living reminder of why he had chosen this path and the difference compassion could make in a seemingly hopeless situation. The Wellington Foundation's annual report featured Chance on its cover that year, highlighting how the foundation had expanded its mission to include animal welfare initiatives. "Some investments yield returns that can't be measured in traditional metrics," William Wellington wrote in the introduction, clearly referring to Michael. On particularly difficult days, when the coursework seemed overwhelming, Michael would take Chance for walks around campus, drawing strength from the dog who had taught him that healing was rarely a straight line, but always a possibility. Their bond had evolved into something reciprocal, each having saved the other in different but equally significant ways. Social media continued to follow Chance's journey, his Instagram account managed by Michael, serving as both inspiration and education about animal rescue. Photos of Chance visiting schools and hospitals showed how a dog once discarded as worthless now brought joy to thousands. The most remarkable transformation, however, wasn't captured in any photograph or news story. It lived in the quiet moments when Chance would rest his head on Michael's lap during late-night study sessions, or in the morning walks they took together, the dog moving with increasing confidence despite his permanent disabilities. "We're both works in progress," Michael often told people who commented on Chance's resilience. What he didn't always add was how the dog had helped him redefine success, not as achievement for its own sake, but as the courage to follow what you knew was right, even when the cost seemed too high. 5 years after that rainy morning by the ditch, Dr. Michael Reynolds placed a grand opening sign outside Riverside Veterinary Clinic, now his own practice after Dr. Wilcox's retirement. Chance, grey around his muzzle but still bright-eyed, wore a special vest identifying him as the clinic's therapy dog. The clinic specialized in rehabilitation for abused and injured animals, offering services on a sliding scale to ensure that financial constraints never prevented an animal from receiving care. The waiting room walls displayed before and after photos of success stories, visual reminders that second chances weren't just possible, but transformative. "We don't just treat injuries," Michael explained to a local reporter covering the opening. "We treat trauma, fear, distrust, all the invisible wounds that come from abandonment and abuse." As he spoke, Chance gently approached a trembling rescue dog, demonstrating the empathy that made him so effective with other animals. Elizabeth Wellington cut the ceremonial ribbon, the Wellington Foundation having provided partial funding for the state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment. "Some investments take time to mature," she said during her speech, "but they yield returns beyond what we could have imagined." Michael's mother watched with tears in her eyes, remembering her initial disappointment when he missed that scholarship interview. "You found your path," she whispered as she hugged him. "Not the one we planned, but the one you were meant for all along." The clinic included a special memorial wall dedicated to animals who hadn't survived abuse, a reminder of why their work mattered. But its most prominent feature was a bronze statue of a small dog with imperfectly healed legs, a permanent tribute to Chance and the ripple effects of one teenager's refusal to walk past suffering. Every new client heard Chance's story, not because Michael wanted recognition, but because he believed in the power of that story to change how people perceived animals in need. "Damaged doesn't mean disposable," became the clinic's unofficial motto, words that applied equally to animals and humans. Mrs. Abernathy, now retired from teaching, volunteered weekly at the clinic, coordinating educational programs that brought students to learn about animal care and compassion. The most important lessons, she often told them, rarely happen in classrooms. Her gaze would find Michael during these sessions, a shared understanding passing between them. On quiet evenings after the clinic closed, Michael would sometimes sit with Chance in the garden behind the building, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The dog who had once been too broken to stand now moved with dignity despite his limitations, his spirit whole even if his body wasn't. Enjoying the story? Comment Hero Teen if this story moved you. For those who followed Chance's journey from the beginning, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous, not just in the dog's physical recovery, but in how one act of compassion had created a wave of change throughout the community and beyond.